name's Mike Hearn, founder of Hydraulic Software, which makes a development tool which is useful for Java people if they want to distribute their applications, in particular desktop or command line apps. It's also useful for Electron developers and other people as well. It's not only for Java developers. Conveyor, that's the name of the tool, is itself written. It's a JVM application. It's written in a mix of Java and Kotlin. And I've been using Java as a platform for a very long time. I've written JavaFX apps. I've written Java libraries. I've written database engines in Java. And I've also done work on JVMs.
So the Conveyor tool, it's a packager that makes it easy to distribute Java and other applications.
It's very simple. You give it your app, you run it, and out pops a set of files, a download website, basically, with packages for every OS, signed, integrated, updatable, everything you need. You just upload those somewhere in S3 bucket or a website, or you can also upload the GitHub releases. And then people can just download and install your app, and Conveyor makes sure that it stays up to date.
In a previous video we had in this series, I talked to the creator of jDeploy, which does something similar. Can you compare them? What's the difference?
Conveyor focuses more on a more conventional sort of platform integrated update experience. With jDeploy, it's very obvious that there's this thing called jDeploy, and it's a Java thing, and it's going to take over the user experience basically. With Conveyor, your users will not know how you've packaged your app. They just get a regular Mac download if that's what they want. They get a regular Windows installer, which will configure Windows to do automatic updates. And on Linux, you get currently a Debian repository. So for a bunch of users, it will stay up to date for them. And the other key difference is that jDeploy last time I looked, it's been a long time since I looked at it, it basically just sort of noped out of the whole code signing thing, and basically Steve signed all the applications with his personal key, in effect, right? He basically signed a universal program loader. Conveyor, again, it's more designed for people who want a more conventional approach where they are actually signing their own software, which means, they take responsibility for it, and therefore they are isolated from what other people do. So those are the main differences. It's primarily about making sure that your users are not faced with this Java specific thing.
Does this also mean that you as a developer need those signing keys from Apple and Windows and to be able to have the signed approach?
You don't have to, because Conveyor will self-sign, but if you make self-signed programs, then your users are going to have a harder time downloading and running them, basically, right? You'll get security errors and warnings, and the user will have to bypass them. It's not really a satisfying outcome, right? It's not a Conveyor problem. This is how the operating systems are designed. That's where Apple and Microsoft have been going for a long time. What I'm looking at and what we might do in future is a service where we will sign your software for you using our keys, but only if it's sandboxed. And that way, it's not really useful for malware to come and take part in that. And this we think will be quite useful for open source projects and people, hobbyists who are starting out, where the overhead of getting code signing keys is just more than they want.
Can you maybe show how this works, what this creates? What is the process of going from your Java application to something which can be installed?
Yes, I think so. So what you get out, if we go and look at a JavaFX app, right, which here we've packaged the sampler for a theme called AvantaFX, which is quite nice. What you get out is a sort of download page, right, that detects the operating system and CPU architecture you're using and just gives your user a big green button. You can, if you want, download and launch for other platforms as well. And obviously, this is not required. This is just a convenience thing that Conveyor generates for you. And when you run Conveyor, it's a command line tool. What you see is it will build all of the platforms for you on that one execution. So you can build apps for Windows and Mac and Linux from your Mac, or from Windows, or from Linux, or from a CI machine. Unlike other conventional packaging solutions, you don't need to set up multi-platform CI and muck about with setting up every platform individually. You can release an app to the entire world from your desktop, which is pretty nice. This is what it looks like if you use it. You basically can generate. This is actually demonstrating an Electron app. As I mentioned, it's useful for everything, but the process is exactly the same. If you want to generate a JavaFX app, you would just write JavaFX instead of Electron. You build it, which in this case is basically just downloading and running some things. And then you've got a config file that looks like this. This is Hocon, actually. So it's a superset of JSON. And you can just set some settings here. And then you can either say run, or you can type make site. And if you type make site, you get the generated packages and files and the output, complete with auto update metadata and so on. If you do run, then it will do a local build and you get your app, which can then go on to use like an API if you want to trigger updates manually. So here you can see that it's actually an incremental build system. So you have a variety of targets, you run them, and here we are. And now you can see that it's actually building the app for every other platform as well. Previously, we just built it for host OS, and now we're doing all of the rest. So you can see that everything, including co-signing, including notarization, uploading things to Apple, getting it past their checkers and so on, is done for you. And what you get out is a big pile of files here, which contains everything, the HTML, and your update metadata, and then you can even upload it to GitHub automatically as well, or upload it to your web server or your S3 bucket or whatever you're using. So that's kind of what it looks like.
So you're actually building every platform, so Linux, Mac, Windows, you can build that on any system. So if you're working on a Windows,
Yeah, exactly.
How is this achieved? Dockers or?
Nope. Conveyor does everything itself. Achieve the old-fashioned way. We're not emulating anything. Conveyor knows all of the package formats, all of the binary formats, all of the signature protocols for every OS, and it does everything itself.
This tool is not free. How hard is it to sell this in an open source world? Well, a lot of people are expecting everything for free.
Well, okay, so firstly, it is free if you are packaging open source apps. And in fact, most of our users are open source users. They just use it and they run it on GitHub releases, GitHub Actions, and they release through GitHub releases, and they self-sign, or they actually have code signing keys and they use it for something else, or they get someone else to sign it for them and they're done. So it is free, and it's also free whilst you are trying it out. So you are only expected to start paying when you pick an update site that's not localhost. So you can actually package your application, try it out, prove that it works, get it to the point where it's updating and everything like that without interacting with us at all. You don't even have to sign up. You don't create an account. There's no sign up form. You just download it and go. So using it feels like you're using an open source tool, even though it's not. If you have a commercial app, then the first time you set your update site to downloads.mycompany.com or whatever, then Conveyor will ask you to go to a checkout page and sign up with a credit card. In terms of like how easy is it to sell, it's not easy to sell developer tools at all, I would say. But I think that's also true even if you make a free developer tool. Developer tools is a difficult market because there's no working discovery mechanism. Most developers block ads, and advertising is how most people discover most products most of the time, but developers don't. There's lots of developer tools vying for attention. People often don't have any way to find out a tool exists. One of the things we've done, which has helped for Electron and Compose, but actually, and also JavaFX, is we've gone to places where developers find out about these things, primarily the user guides. JavaFX doesn't really have a conventional user guide anymore, but we've added it to JFX Central. And then, if people are looking for tools in these places, they'll find out about it there. The actual price is not normally the issue. What we tend to get as feedback is things like, "Oh, I'm just doing a hobby app, but I don't want to open source it. Can I have it for free?" Something like that.
I know that feeling.
So at the moment, we think about ways to fix that every so often. But at the moment, we think if open source is free and if you're making money, we should also get a bit of money as well. That seems fair.
It's absolutely fair because I can imagine that there's a lot of time that went into the development of this tool. So did you already earn it back?
It is being earned back, but it is not yet fully earned back. Actually, I mean, one of the interesting things about this is one of the reasons we charge a subscription rather than a one-off cost is because often developers need a lot of support to get started. It's very common that people come to us, they've never released a desktop app before. So they often get stuck on things that are not strictly speaking conveyor related, but it's the end of their project and they want to ship.
Getting started, yeah.
So we help them with that, and so the cost of the product is partly covering development costs, of course, but it also covers the fact that we spend a lot of time giving very high quality support. I'll sit down and help people debug their problems in some cases with their app or with their runtimes, right? Like I've sat down and debugged problems with the Electron, for example, or with the JVM, which are not strictly needed, but that's the high quality support is part of what you're paying for.
I think you mentioned it, but so does it also do updates? So if I have installed version 1 and I have a 1.1 tomorrow, will it automatically update at startup, or how does it go?
So really good support for online updates is one of the key differentiators of Conveyor. If you look at the free open source tools, that in Java you have jpackage, which just doesn't do updates, and that's basically that's basically useless in today's world. You've got to be able to update your software, right? You can't just throw something over the wall and hope it's right first time. The Electron tools support updates, but in ways that are not ideal, especially from the perspective of Windows network administrators. Actually, the Electron update engine Squirrel is kind of famous for breaking Windows networks because every app installs itself to the user's home directory instead, and then it's a roaming home directory. So like when people log into a new computer, it downloads like gigabytes of Chrome installs and stuff, and then it's in the user's documents, the space map documents. So these stuff get backed up and they don't get deduplicated, and it's tremendously wasteful. Conveyor uses the native update engine on each platform. So on Windows, that's one called MSIX, and Windows will actually update your application in the background. It does Delta updates. It's nicely integrated with Windows admin tools and so on. On Windows, we use Sparkle, which is the de facto standard update engine well, we actually use a modified version of Sparkle. We modify all this stuff. Even when we have open source dependencies, we're often improving them in various ways. And then, yes, as I mentioned, on Linux, we currently support Debian and Ubuntu's apt solution. We don't currently generate RPM repositories. We might in future, or we might do Flatpak. We're looking at that. But yeah, and then on top of that, we offer, we go further and we add features to these update engines. For example, a really popular feature that we have is called aggressive updates. And it's a bit of a strange name. Maybe I should have picked a better name, but aggressive updates is a web style update model. It means that every time the user starts the app, an update check is done and then applied synchronously, and then the app starts. So as long as your users restart your app from time to time, they're always on the latest version. And this is just like the web, where if users leave your app open in a tab for a week, they stay on that version of the JavaScript they loaded, but the moment they hit refresh, you get the latest version of the app. And so this is very good if you have a client-server protocol that moves quickly, right? You just say, oh, it's time to update, please restart the app, and off you go. But we also have entirely silent Chrome-style background updates too. So the app will just update without the user even noticing, and then when they restart it, it's just magically the new version. They never even see it update. And then there's a manual mode where you drive it with an API. So and there's a jar on Maven Central you can just depend on, and then that allows you to control the update engine. So yeah, really sophisticated support for updates. It's just so essential, and these are Delta updates too, by the way.
You said it's free for open source tools. One of them is JFX Central. You mentioned it. So you're doing the distribution of the JFX Central website as an app. So for people who are not aware, JFX Central is that website which gives all the information about JavaFX, but you can also run it as an app on Windows, Mac, I don't know, Linux, I think so.
Yeah, I think we released it for Linux too.
Yeah. So that's done with your tool again.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, we started out by doing that ourselves, and now Dirk, the guy behind JFX Central, he's a customer of ours. So that's worked out well.
So he's using it also for other apps, I think.
Yeah, he's got a software development company, and they use it for some of their apps too.
If I want to prepare a Java application for Conveyor, do I need to build a runnable jar? What do you need?
Yeah, so the process for a Java app depends on your build system. So if you're using Gradle as your build system, there's a Gradle plugin. You apply it, and you're done, basically. And if you want to know how to configure an app and use the API, Conveyor can generate a JavaFX app from the command line out of the box. It's fully working, and you just open it up in your IDE and have a look at how it works. But yeah, effectively, it's apply a Gradle plugin, write a little config file, which basically just contains the display name of your application and the icon. Conveyor can draw icons for you as well. So if you don't have an icon, it will generate one, as well as obviously it will convert to all the formats for each platform, but it also can make a nice kind of default icon for you if you don't. And then you configure the update site. So there's a little bit of extra data you have to supply that's not in your build system. But once you've done that, you can just build your app and then run Conveyor. And that's what you have to do to release it. There's also some support for Maven. And what it's doing, you don't have to make a fat jar or anything. It will just read the class path out of these build tools and then just use those files directly.
So you don't also need to compile it to GraalVM with GraalVM to some native thing. That's all not needed. You don't have these extra hurdles of converting your app to another format.
But what Conveyor does is it reads the Java vendor you're using out of your build tool. Or if you're using Maven, you have to tell it, because Maven doesn't have tool chains in the same way. And then it will download the version of that JVM or that JDK for each platform you're targeting, which usually is 4, right? Windows Intel, Mac Linux Intel, Mac ARM, Mac Intel. And then it runs JLink on all of them. And it will discover it runs JDeps to discover the dependencies your jars have on the core JDK, runs JLink to strip that down. All this is in parallel for each platform. And then it takes those JDKs and bundles them into your app along with your jars. And then it has a custom native launcher that initializes the JDK and initializes the update engines and other things. So from your perspective, it can't really get easier. There's no preparation at all. You just write a Java app that works, and then you release it. Now, what we tend to find is sometimes people need to do a little bit of adjustment post hoc to make their packages work. Usually this is around libraries that want to unpack DLLs at runtime and things. Conveyor can find dynamic libraries inside jars, extract them, put them in the right place. You just have to configure the libraries you're using to just do a system.load library instead of trying to do all the unpacking sequence. You don't even need to do that. Actually, these days, Conveyor will, if you want, leave your jars alone, but it's much better for the user if you pre-extract these and it can do all that. So it has a lot of features for preparing your Java app for packaging. And the responsibility for you as a developer is really basic. It's things like don't write to your application install directory because it's not allowed. It's things like don't hard code relative paths into your app, things like that.
But it's nice that you really use the Java tools because you're staying within that ecosystem of Java and using the tools which are already there. Yeah,
absolutely. And it produces pleasingly small downloads in many cases, right? And we can often get really good results because a lot of jars will contain a shared library for every possible platform. For instance, Conveyor reads through the contents of jars, detects the shared libraries that don't target the right OS, and deletes them. So you're removing a lot of the files that are needed. There's also support for things like JSEF if you want to have an embedded Chrome, and the support for JVM apps is very good. It's not, we also have good support for Electron and native apps and a bit of support for Flutter, but JVM is very, very well supported.
What are the future plans? What can we look forward to?
Conveyor is fairly mature as a product at this point, so a lot of the work is sort of, tweaking and bug fixing and keeping up with the flow of new users and their support requests. But in terms of features, there's a few. One of them is, and this is our next highest priority, is adding support for Azure Trusted Signing, which is Microsoft's new code signing authority. And the reason it's interesting is because it's cheaper than other CAs, basically. If you meet the criteria, then it's you can pay like $10 a month, and that's your certificate, and it's about the same cost for Apple. So that's a popular feature request. People are always looking for, how do I save money on code signing? We are looking at something better for Linux than just app repositories. Whether that's Flatpak or whether that's something custom, I'm not sure yet. The problem with Linux is no one agrees on how to do anything ever. So Ubuntu has Snap and everyone else has Flatpak. And I think, Flatpak seems the best, but it would also create a big pile of new things that would also affect the application developers. And then, so we're looking at that. And then the other thing we're looking at, as I mentioned before, slightly longer term is, what can we do about this code signing requirement? This is by far and away the biggest hurdle to distributing Java desktop apps at this point. Conveyor fixes basically everything else. You can literally, it's no harder than web development, right? You just compile your app and you run Conveyor make copied site, and now you've got a new version released, and your users will update. It's very, very easy. But the code signing part is annoying because it's expensive and takes its bureaucracy to get set up and so on. So macOS and Windows and to some extent Linux do have built-in sandboxes these days. And so looking at activating those sandboxes to the extent that then we can take over and just sort of sign for you would be really nice, and that would make it a lot more feasible to just have people just distributing little apps that don't justify the overhead of getting properly set up, but people would still like to distribute stuff where you would use a fat jar today. And you would tell people, manage your own updates.
Yeah, I went through the process of getting an Apple key for, I then used it with jDeploy, but to get that key is really a long process, and you have to pay for it. That's the first hurdle, but then getting to the process that you have your key is so many steps, and it's really...
Conveyor does a lot to simplify this already. For example, it will generate a root key that you can then write down on a piece of paper. I don't know if you've ever played with Bitcoin, but that's a common concept in that world, right? Where you just you can back up your key with a pen and paper. It's really nice. And then Conveyor will generate all the other keys you need, and then it will help you go through this process, and it understands how to interact with HSMs and cloud HSMs, and it has all the features you need to help do that in continuous builds, which is also where code signing gets painful, right? People don't want to release from their laptop, but Microsoft really wants you to protect your keys in a hardware device, right? And so Conveyor already has so much support to make this easy for people. But ultimately, you have to prove your identity, you have to pay, and then you have to, at some level, manage the resulting key, even if it's just backing it up. So eliminating that would be great. Yeah.
Would be really thankful if that could be achieved across all platforms. Okay.
Oh, and then the other thing you mentioned is native image, and we've done some experiments with that already. You can distribute native images with Conveyor, but it's not as integrated as it could be. It's not as easy to use as it could be, and I'd really like to fix that, because that would be great. But you would then be back to multi-platform continuous build systems. And it's more complex.
Anything more you want to tell about this tool?
I think we've covered it. There's nice tutorials on the website if you want to go and play it out. There's sample apps, and there's even a Discord chat room where you can come and say hello. So you can just drop in and ask any questions you like there.
And people who are interested in JavaFX can definitely start with the JFX Central app and install that and try it and see how it works.
Yes, they can.
How it can done.
Absolutely, they can. Or they can just download Conveyor and generate a Hello World JavaFX app where everything's integrated out of the box.